Men bird, Roberto and Raid, had disappeared while practicing his favorite sport, the wingsuit, or extreme parachuting, during one of the risky jumps from the Roca Ferrada de Montserrat in Catalonia. On that occasion, it was launched by a cavity in the rock with little space to maneuver safely. His companions and friends, Rafa, Pedro, and Lucio, waited expectantly for their landing, on a green plain, at the foot of the Great Rocky Massif. They saw him arrive at full speed, dominating the route with the usual precision. A point was to pull the opening ring of the parachute, when in front of the attentive eyes of his friends, it vanished as if it were a hologram. 20 years passed, after the mysterious disappearance, but his three fellow adventurers still missed him. Rafa had already completed 41 years, Pedro and Lucio 39 and 40 respectively. They still maintained their passion for this risky sport, and decided to climb again to the Roca Ferrada to throw themselves as they once did to emptiness, as they did with their dear friend Roberto and Raid. Lucio jumped the first, opening like the giant petal of a purple flower, behind Rafa, adding a new shade of blue to the sky. Finally, Pedro with his striking yellow-orange clothing, giving the appearance of a gigantic multicolored bird. Like strange birds crossing the skies, the three men descend at breakneck speed towards the green plain at the bottom of the landscape. The jump has been a success as usual, and the three of them on solid ground collect their equipment after congratulating themselves with a big hug. Rafa turns suddenly, pointing to the sky. Someone else descends to where they are. It has just opened the parachute. It has the same color as the one Roberto used to wear, but much more deteriorated and dirty. The character takes land a few hundred meters from them. Looks like a young boy, wearing a white outfit with red diamonds, like the one worn by his missing friend. The three companions do not approach the newcomer, but are paralyzed by a strange sense of perplexity. The young man, on the other hand, approaches them with a very familiar smile. There is a silence that nobody dares to break, except the newcomer, who tells them with great joy that he is his great friend and companion Roberto and Raid. They all embrace each other between tears and sobs of joy. After such a lovely meeting, the four friends sit on the green grass, look at each other for a long time without saying a word. It's like a silence coming from space that cannot be broken. "I have incredible and wonderful things to tell you, companions," exclaims the still young Roberto, his face illuminated by a strange enthusiasm that penetrates through the eyes of his three friends. They remain attentive and eager for answers. Roberto begins to tell his story from the moment he disappeared into the air while his friends waited for him on the ground. "Just before pulling on the ring of my parachute, I felt absorbed by a kind of whirlwind, as if I were throwing a tornado into an empty space, without stars or stars. I felt in a nothing, external and internal, losing all notion of space and time. The time lapse could have been seconds or years. Suddenly I appeared in the middle of a strange foggy wind that kept me in suspense with all my equipment. It was fortunate that I had not thrown the parachute ring to the bottom, that if I had, the wind would have dragged me and hit me against the strange menhirs that rose all around me. They were gigantic monoliths eroded by the sand that dragged the strong wind, always constant without changing direction, facing me all the time. I do not know how long I stayed, falling without falling, in that unknown floating, between wind, sand and strange geological formations completely unknown to me. My body little by little, was noticing the fatigue, while trying not to hit me against the rocky yards of more than 200 meters high, stratified in red, yellow, white and greenish gray. I felt faint and my arms gave way. The wind dragged me strongly towards one of the monoliths. I closed my eyes, giving myself to the inevitable, but someone grabbed me with strength of one of my arms, and then someone else of the other. I felt a voice inside my head. It said, "Quiet friend, do not be afraid, you are safe." I turned my head to the right, and saw a being that could well be a bird, but with a humanoid form, its entire body covered with bluish and white feathers, yellow eyes like those of an owl, head equal in size to that of man, and with huge blue wings with yellow ends. Very beautiful beings and elegant appearance. I do not know as they did, but inexplicably, on the move, they took me somewhere, in the opposite direction of the wind. We began to gain height between the curtain of sand and air, and in the distance you could glimpse a rocky red monolith, of gigantic proportions, more than 1,000 meters high. The thickness was impossible to calculate, but it could have more than 350 meters. Where did you take me? I asked them from my own mind. They both received my mental waves, and they answered me that they would introduce me to Omniad, the main head of the second largest monolith in the area where the Yads live, a great family to which we belong. After avoiding the dangerous obstacles that were presented in the strange flight, with great skill, we finally reached our destination. We crossed through a large opening in the highest of the impossible geological formation. We continued the flight through caves of proportions gigantic, self-illuminated by millions of a kind of phosphorescent locusts that completely covered walls and vaults. We finally reached a kind of smooth platform similar to marble, where they deposited me. My two hosts folded their huge wings and sent me a telepathic wave with the suggestion that I follow them. I went ahead, and one on each side of me. They guided me through a long passageway of floors and walls polished like glass, at the end of which was a doorway finely decorated with beautifully polished rhinestones. The door opened before us, showing a huge room the size of a large theater. In the background I could see who could be the leader of the place. The enclosure, completely full of winged beings. It seems that they were waiting for me. The character made a sign with the hand claw, and my companions caught me and took me flying over all the crowd gathered there. Once before the president of the winged, this asked me to which tribe belonged, being very surprised by my clothing, stroked the helmet as astonished by its color and brightness, and above all, the video camera located at the top of it. I come from the planet Earth, I answered with full voice, which greatly surprised everyone present. Since a million years ago this race had stopped using spoken language. I took off my helmet, leaving my head uncovered. The physique of my face fascinated them. The silence was broken by a hiss of feathers as the wings rubbed, all present in an alert attitude. After jumping with 3 of my friends from a high mountain similar to the ones you have here, I entered a strange whirlpool that transported me to your world. I'm very scared and I want to go home. The head of the winged ones looked at me fixedly, and told me to consider myself at home. Then they undressed me completely, being even more perplexed to see that my body was totally devoid of feathers. By order of the great leader, my 2 captors accommodated me in a luxurious cell finely decorated, very comfortable, with an ideal temperature of 18 degrees. I felt like in a 5-star hotel. My 2 friends left me alone, and I took advantage to rest from my adventurous adventure, on a comfortable bed covered with a multicolored quilt of finely woven feathers. The fatigue overcame me in such a way that despite everything that happened I was deeply asleep. When I woke up, I thought it had all been a nightmare, and I breathed as if relieved considering that possibility. But I was wrong. I was not only in that otherworldly room, but I had changed my appearance radically. I was suddenly horrified. I had a fine plumage all over the body, and my arms were now a pair of white wings with yellow-orange ends. I began to run like crazy, beating my arms now turned into wings, able to take flight. Far from worrying, I felt in me a strange frenzy that pushed me strongly to take flight. I went back successfully to the first attempt, crashing down on a white marble statue, and was about to shatter it, if it had not been for the accurate intervention of a bird woman sent by the leader to assist me and teach their customs. I was surprised when he told me to follow him with a sweet voice in perfect Castilian. Okay, I replied, using my vocal cords as any mortal on earth would. His voice sounded like the song of a wonderful bird in my ears. He led me to a huge opening, which opened to the outside. When I reached the edge of the abyss, I stopped in my tracks. But without a word he threw me into the void of a strong push. I screamed as I did in my usual throes, trying to stay balanced in the midst of the continuous wind that must have been about 90 km/h. My companion was struck by the way she kept me in flight, without hesitation, and handling my new wings as she did with my flights on Earth. I found myself suddenly flying in the company of a bird woman, in an unknown world, but I behaved as if I had lived in it forever. We spent a long time sliding between the endless monoliths, all of them inhabited by a multitude of beings who watched us from the huge holes, which covered their towering walls like giant bee cells. Everything made me think that there was by chance crossed a dimensional portal, and I was now in a rare planet overpopulated of different races of beings that tried to survive in a hostile place, permanently cloudy and windswept, that only ceased when the planet was eclipsed by a huge moon every 18 days of only 14 hours. The rare days were happening. My transformed body adapted quickly. I took the liberty of naming the accompanying couple assigned to me. Paloma Velos called her, something very strange for the people of the Prastamus, which he lacked. Time was not part of the lives of the inhabitants. Here lived an eternal and intense present. Survival was not easy in this world overpopulated by a multitude of species that devoured each other. Myself, on one of my flights, I was almost crushed by a hollow cylindrical creature, with thousands of sharp teeth all along its interior. Their victims were absorbed and torn apart as the predator turned. The bones came from behind, while the flesh was digested by the inner walls of the being. The Prostamitus loved the way he cooked the tasty blooms, a kind of lampreys, which used to parasitize the backs of some giant beings that floated in the wind. Everyone here, they were all food. It was very difficult to keep a fire with the strong currents that exist everywhere. Paloma Velos, my companion and teacher, taught me everything about the life of her people. I can say with certainty that I passed, according to my calculations, more than 50 years of the terrestrials, although I saw with strangeness, as my transformed feathered body remained always young and in shape. The three companions listened fascinated as statues, without blinking, as if trying not to get lost. Not even the slightest detail of the experiences he told them. His new friend Roberto and Raid appeared. The incredible stories were one after another. Which is more interesting and exciting? The night fell on our friends, and decided to leave the place of the meeting, to address the authorities, in order to clarify the mysterious disappearance of the young man.